Welcome to the podcast of GregorySmith.wine. In this series of podcasts, we explore Italy, and in the first episode, we visit the region of Apulia, or in Italian, Puglia. Apulia is located in the southeastern part of Italy, the heel of Italy's boot. The region has a very long history. Pagliacci Cave, near Rignano Garganico, in the Foggia province, is today one of Europe's most important Paleolithic archaeological sites. The Greeks began to colonize southern Italy in the 8th century BC. Upon their arrival, they encountered a land rich in indigenous vines, so much so that their name for the new land in Greek was Oenotria, or the land of vines. So Apulia has an ancient link with the vine and wine, and also with the olive tree and olive oil, a link characteristic of the culture and tradition of this land. With its pleasing climate, the poet Horace described it as "where springtime is eternal." Apulia rapidly became the wine tank for not only Italy but also all of Europe. Its wines were denser and darker in color, and with a higher alcohol content, they would arrive to Italy's northern regions where they were blended with local wines to give them more body and color. It's probable that the Greeks brought some of their own vines to Apulia, but probably the most important thing they brought with them was the vine training system known as albarello. In this system, each vine is treated like a small tree. Each vine is continuously and meticulously cared for to guarantee that it receives adequate aeration and optimal sunlight. With his defeat at the Battle of Benevento in 275 BC, Pyrrhus, king of Epirus in Greece, abandoned southern Italy, leaving it to the Romans. Eventually, the wines of Apulia would find their way to Rome. In 244 BC, on the Adriatic coast, the port of Brindisi was opened, rapidly expanding trade and the exportation of the region's wines. At the same time, Taranto's vast wine cellars were constructed by digging into the rocky Ionian coast. In his great work, Naturalis Historia, Pliny the Elder mentioned several Apulian grape varieties, including Malvasia nera di Brindisi and Malvasia nera di Lecce. Today we know that these are one and the same. He also mentioned Negro Amaro and Nero di Troia. After the fall of the Roman Empire, Apulia faced difficulties, and monasteries took on an important role in viticulture. Throughout the Middle Ages, the region would continue producing vast quantities of wine. Indeed, Dante Alighieri described the region as a beautiful land where sunshine is converted into wine. Frederick II, Holy Roman Emperor and King of Sicily and Jerusalem, understood the importance of viticulture to Apulia and ordered the planting of vineyards in the area around Castel del Monte. In 1362, Joanna I of Naples issued an edict prohibiting the importation of wines outside of Apulia. Andrea Bacci, personal physician to Pope Sixtus V, naturalist and wine enthusiast, described several wines from the region in his book De Naturalis Vinorum Historia. The wines of Bari, Brindisi, and Lecce are of very good quality. The best of Apulia are from Manfredonia. Unfortunately, the region would eventually become known for its vast quantities of mediocre wine. Finally, in the 1980s, some of the region's producers would begin to strive for quality, among them Hacienda Agricola Marmo Maria, the producer of the wines of Tenuta Cocevola. Situated in the extreme southeast of the Italian peninsula, Apulia covers some 19,357 square kilometers, or 7,469 square miles, in a succession of wide plains and undulating hills. The region is the least mountainous of Italy, with the highest altitudes in the north of the region. Mount Cornacchia is the region's highest peak at 1,152 meters, or 3,780 feet above sea level. The region's Daunian mountains generally don't exceed 1,150 meters, or 3,773 feet above sea level. Apulia's most prominent plain is the Tavolieri delle Apulie, located at the base of the Gargano promontory. Agriculturally, it is one of Italy's most productive plains. Apulia is a very arid region. Its few rivers are torrential and located in the Tavolieri. In other places, rainwater filters through the limestone bedrock, forming subterranean streams which emerge near the coast. The subterranean water is for the most part abundant, and there are many caves and pits. The Castellana caves are particularly striking. Apulia's climate is principally Mediterranean, except in the Tavolieri zone, which shows some continental aspects. The land is covered with garrigue, lowland shrubs typical of the dry climate influenced by the warm tramontane winds arriving from Africa and the Levant, as well as the cold, dry boreal winds arriving from the northeast. In Apulia, there are more than 40 varieties of grapes grown for winemaking, including several foreign varieties like Cabernet Sauvignon and Riesling, but here I'll only mention the most important ones. Sangiovese is a variety highly associated with the Tuscany region and the iconic wines of Chianti and Brunello di Montalcino, but Apulia is the region with the second highest plantings of this variety. The wines typically show notes of cherry, plum, red berries, herbs, licorice, violets, and tea. With bottle aging, notes of forest floor, leather, and tobacco develop. The wines are typically of medium-high body with medium-high levels of acidity and tannin. Primitivo has an interesting history. California claims it as an indigenous variety under the name Zinfandel, but this couldn't be possible since the Vitis vinifera species is native to Europe and not North America. Scientists have determined it is of Croatian origin, where it was first mentioned in the 16th century under the name Tribidrag. In Italy, it's called Primitivo, and Apulia has 98% of the country's Primitivo plantings. Primitivo wines typically show notes of cherry, strawberry, herbs, and sometimes tobacco and tar. The wines tend to be of medium-high body and tannins and medium-low acidity. Negro Amaro is an indigenous Apulian variety. It was thought to be of Greek origin, but DNA testing has proven that's not the case. It is one of the region's most important varieties. Negro Amaro wines typically show notes of black cherry, ripe or dried plum, blackberry, thyme, and even a touch of shoe polish. The wines are typically medium-high in body with medium acidity and medium-high tannins. They can be velvety and show a sensation of ripe fruit on the palate, but they mature relatively quickly. Apulia is red wine country, but there is some white wine, and the Trebbiano grape is the most important here. Trebbiano in Italy can refer to several distinct white grape varieties, but in Apulia, the Trebbiano di Toscana dominates. In France, it is called Ugni Blanc, the principal grape variety used in the production of cognac. Trebbiano di Toscana produces light and fresh wines, easy to drink, with notes of green apple, lemon, white peach, basil, and crushed seashells. The typical wine is dry, lighter in body, and with medium-high acidity. But the jewel of the region is Nero di Troia, also called Uva di Troia. Today, Nero di Troia is the more common name, maybe because the wine producers of the region were motivated by the success of the Sicilians with their wines made from Nero d'Avola. Unfortunately, today there is less Nero di Troia planted than in years past, but the wines tend to be of high quality and in many cases blended with other grape varieties. Nero di Troia wines typically show notes of red cherry, red currant, black pepper, tobacco, forest floor, black olive, and juniper berry. The wines are typically medium-bodied with high acidity and medium-high tannins. As a member of the European Union, Italian wines are subject to EU legislation. The classification can be visualized as a pyramid, the pyramid of quality. At the foot of the pyramid are the most basic wines, formerly called vino da tavola, or table wine. They are now simply called wine or Italian wine. These can be varietal wines, those made from a single grape variety, or generic wines without mention of grape variety or vintage. IGT is the acronym of the Italian term Indicazione Geografica Tipica, the English translation being Typical Geographic Indication. The European Union equivalent term in Italian is Indicazione Geografica Protetta, with its English equivalent being Protected Geographical Indication. You can find either the Italian or the EU term on the label of Italian wines of this category. These wines have a defined geographical origin and a quality or reputation attributed to their place of origin. The wines are subject to stricter controls than the basic wine category, but less strict controls than those of the higher DOP category. According to the latest update of Italy's Ministry of Agricultural, Food and Forestry Policies in December 2020, the country currently boasts 118 IGTs. DOP is the Italian language EU acronym for Denominazione di Origine Protetta, the English language equivalent being Protected Designation of Origin, or PDO. These are wines whose quality or properties are significantly or exclusively determined by the geographical environment, including natural and human factors. In Italy, there are two subcategories within the PDO category, DOC, or Denominazione di Origine Controllata, and DOCG, Denominazione di Origine Controllata e Garantita. In theory, these represent the country's best quality wines. In the case of DOCG wines, these are subject to additional laboratory analyses and to a sensory evaluation by a panel of experts. So these wines are not only controlled, but also guaranteed. The country currently has 332 DOCs and 76 DOCGs. Apulia currently has 6 IGTs, 28 DOCs, and 4 DOCGs. But the region continues to be known for its production of basic quality bulk wines. Of its typical annual production of more than 9 million hectoliters, or nearly 238 million gallons, 71%, or more than 6 million hectoliters, or nearly 159 million gallons of wine, are classified as the basic wine category. IGP wines account for 22% of the production, and DOP wines account for only 7% of the annual production. Geographically speaking, Apulia is divided into 3 sub-regions. Wines labeled IGP Puglia can be made from wines produced in any of Apulia's 3 sub-regions. As the wine glasses indicate, various styles are produced as indicated left to right: white wine, rosé wine, red wine, sparkling white wine, sparkling red wine, sweet white wine, and sweet red wine. Daunia, the northern part of Apulia, includes the Gargano Peninsula, a part of the southern Apennine mountain chain, and the Tavoliere delle Puglie, the vast plain which is the center of the subregion's wine production. Daunia has its own IGP and also 5 DOCs. The DOC Cace Mimite di Lucera has an interesting story, and its name is associated with the local dialect. Individual farmers had very small vineyard plots and were not able to afford their own grape press. Each would rent the local press for only one day, and so would have to complete the pressing of the grapes quickly. So the farmer would have to cace, or take out his freshly pressed must, leaving the press ready for the next to mimite, or put in his grapes. Murgia, the central part of Apulia, is a vast hilly plateau. The soils contain a high concentration of limestone, and indeed the subregion's name comes from the old local dialect's word for stone. Murgia has its own IGP, 5 DOCs, and 3 of Apulia's 4 DOCGs. Murgia is home to the region's famous Castel del Monte, a fortress constructed in the 13th century and castle and principal residence of Emperor Frederick II. The building lends its name to the Castel del Monte DOC and to the region's 3 DOCGs, Castel del Monte Rosso Riserva, Castel del Monte Bombino Nero, and Castel del Monte Nero di Troia Riserva. Small Etria Valley is also within Murgia, birthplace of Minutolo, a white grape variety making fragrant wines reminiscent of those of the Muscat of Alexandria grape. Etria Valley also has its own IGP and 3 DOCs. Salento, Apulia's southern subregion, forms the heel of Italy's boot. It is a relatively flat region located between the Adriatic and Ionian Seas. Salento has its own IGP and 11 DOCs. The Negro Amaro grape is the specialty of the region, but the Primitivo grape is also popular. Magna Graecia is a subregion within Salento, effectively the province of Taranto, its name reminding us that it was the center of Greek civilization in southern Italy in the 7th century BC. IGP Tarantino applies to wines made within the province of Taranto. Magna Gracia also has 3 DOCs and 1 DOCG, the sweet red wine made from the Primitivo variety, Primitivo di Manduria Dolce Naturale. I hope you've enjoyed this brief presentation about Italy's Apulia region. If you are in Peru and would like to try an Apulian wine, I can highly recommend those of Tenuta Cocevola, the Castellammonte Rosso, and the Castellammonte Rosso Vandalo. The wines are made from 100% Nero di Troia grapes, excellent quality at a reasonable price. Please feel free to write me at gsmith@abever.com.pe.